so many people, including myself, suffer in silence, that by overcoming out loud and inviting others to, it's I think been a powerful platform. And today, I love when we have local and really inspiring young people on. And today we have both. I want to introduce you all to Nick Morales. Nick is the owner and CEO of Monday Media Marketing. Is a very good friend of mine. I've had the opportunity to get to know Nick personally and professionally. Does some work for me and helping me grow some of the things that I'm doing. Welcome to Overcome Out Loud.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This will be super cool.
Yeah,
excited.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. You're such a courageous and inspiring person to me. And I think as we talked about before we came on air, especially young people. There's so much pressure on young people today. I think FOMO, that fear of missing out, has given way to fear of other people's opinions. We're in the cancel culture, and there's a lot of influence from external sources. It's just great to have such a courageous and inspiring young man like yourself on. But this version of you that's in front of us today is not always the version of you that's existed. So
definitely not.
Yeah, man, it's great. And so can you tell us a little bit about kind of your origin story and kind of tell us a little bit about where you come from? And the great thing about that for us is so many people come from so many different places that everybody has an opportunity to identify. So how did you grow up, and what was it like being a young Nick Morales?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad, and there's a lot of stuff in between. I would definitely say I didn't have it as worse as some people I know, but I felt like when I was a kid, a lot of people had it better than me, which contributed to a lot of the depression, me justifying a lot of the stuff that I did. It was like other people have more than me, so I can do this. I grew up right around this area, bounced around between Agora, Thousand Oaks, Westlake Village, and I grew up with my mom, who's a single mom. My dad was in and out of jail and in and out of rehab when I was little. And so I never really knew the guy, just knew my mom. It was me and her against the world. She was the most amazing thing that I could have had in that moment, and I'm so grateful for her. When I started getting a little bit older, around the end of elementary school, my mom just couldn't afford to have us where we were, and my grandparents took us in, and bless their souls, they have been here for me like nobody else. But through that time, it was like, my dad's getting deported for, selling methamphetamine. A lot of people around me and my family were kind of looking on like me and my mom as like the black sheep of the family. And I just felt very outcasted. And, I played hockey when I was younger, and I saw all the kids in the hockey team that had their dads with them. And I just, I didn't have that. And, like I said, I definitely didn't have the worst story of them all, but for me at that time, it felt like I was different, and I had an excuse to do things like like you shouldn't. I do drugs and steal things and steal cars, and I'm like, nobody can really tell me not to do this because I just don't have the same upbringing as the people around me.
It sounds like and I think, one of the things that I realized from so many of our guests and so many people that have found unhealthy coping skills is that it's a really formidable period of time, that young adolescence, and really the most important thing we need during that time is the feeling of belonging. It's kind of that tribal feeling that we need of I belong, I'm a part of. And, I don't think people really understand that social rejection, real or perceived, causes as much pain as if not more pain as in our body, in our system, as actual physical pain does. And so all of these we're really wired through these stories we tell ourselves. I mean, the world looked a certain way to you. The world looked, like you were in a scarcity position relative to other people. You weren't comfortable in your own skin.
Exactly.
You see other people with dads, and we're desperately trying to fit in. And so I can't create a dad, but I can change the way I feel about not having a dad. And that's kind of what I hear coming out in your story is a bit of this. I can't change the reality and how it's making me feel, so I'm going to change the way I feel, and hopefully that'll make the reality easier to digest.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's exactly what it was. It was, I had this perception on life that was very, not favorable to, what reality actually was. Lots of people don't have dads. Lots of people have estranged family. Lots of people, are weird and don't fit in their classrooms and like grow up to be great people who, none of that mattered.
Right.
But for me, it did.
Yeah.
In that moment, for me, it was the most important thing going on in my life.
And by the way, it's for most people. I mean, that the idea of, and I think it comes from, that tribal sense. If you're with the tribe, you're safe. Evolutionary. If you were part of a tribe, you had protection, you were safe, you were accepted. You would, procreate. You would extend your family tree. All these things happen, and so we became, rightly so, very connected to being part of a group. I mean, we thrive as part of a group, and to feel like we're on the outside, isn't natural for us. And so I think what you're describing applies to a lot of us. But as you're describing it, how we deal with it, what we do with it and how we narrate it is really important. I love that contrast that you just gave about how it could have been just fine, but for you, the lens you saw was, I'm not good enough.
Yeah,
my life isn't
and
good
that's
enough.
that's like kind of what everything we've talked about previous to the podcast is about, right? It's like it's not necessarily about what's happening; it's how we react to it. It's the lens we put on it. It's what we do because of it, and whether it's one of your best friend's wife, spouse, mom dying, or, this as easy as like, you left your wallet at the grocery store. It's like so minimal to extreme things can be handled with just a change of perspective. And that's kind of like what my story was I had a really, not favorable perspective on life that led me to believe I could do certain things and, do drugs and steal cars and do all this stuff that just wasn't good for me and anybody around me, but I justified it. And that's exactly what led me there.
Yeah, it's almost like you felt entitled, like this is my solution. I mean, you guys get to have your dad, you get to have your family that love you, get to have.
Yeah.
I get to have this. I'm gonna do this.
Yeah, it was my it was like this was my thing. And it's interesting, as I got into drugs and alcohol when I was really young. I was like 12 years old. I remember the first time I drank alone. I was by myself at home. I was just drinking my grandparents' beer, and while that was happening, it got to the point where I was like on the verge of passing out and throwing up the first time I got drunk, and I was in love. Whereas like most people I have heard don't have that same experience. And I fell in love. I knew that was my solution. I knew that's what I wanted to do all the time. And I kind of just framed my entire life on how I could not feel the same way. It was the dad thing. Other people around me had more money than my family did. It was easier and more comfortable for them to live, and I just didn't. So I was like, I'm just going to do this way for the rest of my life, and I'll be great. And it worked for a while until it didn't.
Yeah, tell me. I mean, I've heard a lot of descriptions of early induction into a chemical solution to an emotional problem. You just nailed it. I mean, it's incredible the way you described it, which was, this changed the way I felt. And I'll often, because a lot of it isn't what you drank or how much you drank or even what happened. It was why you drank. And at the time, you drank because you wanted to change the way you felt, and it did that.
Yeah.
And it changed the way you felt. And therefore, anytime I don't like the way I feel, although it was grandpa's beer at the time, I know there's something I can find outside of myself to change the way I feel. And you chase that, you continue to chase that.
100%. I mean, it was the only thing that worked, right? It was like I had self-induced anxiety that was only like I was only able to relieve with drugs and alcohol. I didn't have, coping mechanisms of like shifting my perspective. I didn't know meditation actually worked. I'm 12 years old and like having overwhelming anxiety attacks, and like, smoking weed helps. And so it just kind of, it set me up for a career of drug use. It was just like, it was so comfortable. I always describe it as like, it was my first romantic relationship.
Yeah. Wow.
Drugs and alcohol were there for me in a way that nobody else or nothing could be at that moment. And that's why it felt so comfortable.
And you lean into that comfort, right? I mean, ultimately we're comfort seeking. I think the human perspective is to avoid pain and gain pleasure, and we can do both of those things in a number of different ways. So tell us a little bit about the progression. So it goes from 12 years old, and as you're listening in, Nick is, I call, he's wise. I feel like I'm sitting in front of such an old soul because you just had your 22nd birthday.
About to.
Yeah, about to have your 22nd birthday, and so you're getting the wisdom of somebody who over the course of about 10 years has become the person, the man who's sitting in front of me. And to me it's remarkable, and I get really emotional when I think about all the things you've been through and who you are today. How did this progress for you? I mean, I think a lot of people, I didn't really deal with my issues until I was 42. So how did this kind of fast track this dependency that you had, and how it turned from comfort to a lot of comfort and little problems to some comfort and more problems to just a lot of problems?
Yeah, I mean, I started off with alcohol. Both my parents are, were in and out of 12-step programs. My dad, like I said from the beginning, was in and out of jails, prisons, and rehabs, my whole life up until when he got deported for it. And so I saw this and I was like, this is bad. Like, I should not be doing these things. I played hockey when I was younger. I was very the kid that was like, this is never going to be me. Like, I was very straight edge. And, until I drank that one time, following that, it was like all bets were off. I could do anything I wanted now. As soon as I drank, I was curious about weed. I was curious about everything else. And, I'm not very good at hiding things. At least I wasn't at that time. And, I started to get caught pretty quickly by the people in my life and at school. And so I was getting drug tested, at school and by my grandparents and parents. And so I had to find other methods of getting high, which involved, prescription pills, because they get out of your system quickly, and cough syrup, like over-the-counter cough syrup. It was just whatever I could get my hands on. And when I was 13 or 14, whatever age you are when you go into high school, I ended up hanging out next to one of the local high schools and meeting this guy named Smokey. And some tells me Smokey wasn't the president of the debate team. No, he was a drug dealer. And,
of course he was. Him
and I, got to be really good friends. He gave me my first line of meth, and I ended up selling for him. I was like, it was very an odd feeling. I was like 13, 14 years old, and I was like delivering drugs to like owners of businesses in the Agora area and like walking into their storefronts, which was very odd. I like had no idea those things were going on. And, I started to kind of do that. And, the more I did it, the more the guy I was working for was convincing me like, well, you gotta like, know what you're selling. And so I started doing more and more. And, I remember the first time I did it, I was with like my best friend at the time, Katie, and we're standing at the top of the Westlake Reservoir. And I remember I just done it, and I'm looking over at her, and I'm like, I like this way too much. And I knew it, but I knew I wasn't going to stop. I continued on doing that, and it ended me up on probation in 2 different counties. Selling drugs was like an addiction in its own. I loved the money. I was like 14 years old making like $10,000 a month selling drugs, and in Agora, and it was like, I fell in love with the lifestyle. It was like I would come home and I'd have like weapons around my room, big bags of drugs, scales everywhere, and like stacks of money.
Like a movie.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. It felt like I was living in a movie.
I was going to ask you, did it feel, I mean, it seems surreal. I mean, at that age,
it was surreal because I was high all the time.
Were you worried of getting caught? Was there this kind of that's part of it a little bit, isn't it? The excitement of like knowing you're doing something wrong.
And I did get caught a lot. I've probably gotten arrested like 10 times before I was 16. And I ended up getting kicked out of my grandparents' house, and then kicked out of my mom's boyfriend's house. And I was living in Agora in one of the apartments there with 3 people. All of them were over 30. and I'm like 15 at this point, and I'm like selling drugs out of their 1 bedroom apartment, sleeping on the couch on the floor. Um, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. It didn't feel sad to me. It felt like I was free from any, nobody could tell me what to do. Nobody like kept my schedule. People didn't know where I was half the time. I was paying for, it was very weird. I was like paying for my cell phone bill. I was like paying for my rent. I remember like the very odd feeling of walking into the grocery store for the first time and like purchasing my own groceries and like shampoo and stuff like that. It was very weird.
Yeah. But it became the only life you knew. So
Yeah.
I mean, to you, the rest of the world's kind of off kilter. It's like this.
Well,
Isn't everyone doing this?
and
I mean,
that's what it was. I remember like I was, a few times, I'm doing meth, so I'm up all day and all night, and I remember it was like 5, 6 in the morning. I'm standing out on the balcony of the apartment, and you can see the Starbucks in Agora from there. And I'm doing my drugs as I normally do, and I'm like weighing out my drug bags to sell to people that day, and um, I see like a few like different like businessmen and women like in their like suit and ties and like like really nice clothes, like in their nice cars, like on their way to work. And I just remember thinking like, how sad. How sad it is for them to be like stuck in the mundane like day to day of going off to their corporate their corporate businesses and sitting in their offices and getting coffee at 5 in the morning. Like, how weird of them, as I'm this 15-year-old kid, like doing hard drugs and like, running a drug business out of an Agora apartment. Like, it just didn't make sense. I was completely delusional.
It can be seen as delusional, but we've got this. I think our egos and our minds are these really amazing traps to where they want us to feel comfortable. They want us to feel connected, and so they create this. Our mind can create this confirmation bias. Can say, that's weird. This isn't, because we. I call it the rationalization, justification, and minimization of unhealthy behaviors to justify an unhealthy existence. And so our mind, it's like people that smoke experience cognitive dissonance all the time. It's like, they know smoking's bad. I think everybody at this point in the world knows that smoking's bad for you. They do it. And most will, as I did, it's like, I haven't been doing it that long, I'm going to stop soon. It's like you go through this whole mental gymnasium, in this kind of gorilla mind of ours to make us feel comfortable doing something we know we shouldn't do. And that's cognitive dissonance at its best. It's like, I know I'm selling drugs, doing drugs, and all of these other unhealthy things, but I'm rationalizing because at least I'm not one of them going to work every day. At least I'm not living that boring life.
Exactly. And it went back to like what I felt as a kid. It was like I didn't fit in, and so it transferred from like, I don't feel like I fit in. I don't feel comfortable. I'm comparing myself to others. That like the easiest option was to dissociate and act better than. And it was the only way of me being able to feel good about what I was doing was like presenting myself in my own head as better than the rest of the world. I knew like clearly the 15-year-old doing meth and selling drugs had it going on and figured out life. And it just made sense, but it didn't. I'm on probation in 2 different counties. I'm like lying every other day to the girlfriend I'm with. We're like in love, at 16, and and it was interesting, right? Like she kept catching me doing meth, and she was like shooting heroin behind my back, and it was this whole thing. And I kept promising her I was going to stop, and I couldn't, and I'd go back to it. And the kind of final straw was we tried to run away to Mexico. And, we had a car that was going to take us there, and, a bunch of crazy stuff. Her parents showed up. They called the cops. I stashed her and my drugs like up in the hills of Newbury Park, and they somehow found her while the cops were talking to me. And it was like this whole, it felt like a movie scene, like the end of the movie.
You didn't know it was the end of the movie, but it was feeling like the end of the movie.
It felt like it.
Yeah.
But I didn't plan on stopping. I was going to keep doing what I was doing. But and so I was at the point where I had 3 or 4 court appearances that I needed to make, and the last time I was in court for my stuff was if you get caught up for anything, you're going to juvenile hall. And so I just gotten caught up for like, possession for sales, driving while intoxicated, driving without a license, stuff like that. And so I knew I was going. I was like, this is where I'm heading. There's a law though that you can't pull a minor out of a residential treatment center to put them in juvenile hall, and so that's how I ended up in rehab.
Wow.
I was like,
yeah,
rehab's better than jail, but I brought drugs in with me. I had still no intentions of changing, and over the course of the 3 months I was there, I just kept feeling worse about myself. I had made all these promises to change, and I wanted to follow through with them. I was writing letters to everybody. I didn't really have a method for sobriety or changing or anything. They gave me a bunch of like worksheets to do. They're like, what are your triggers? Who are the people you hang out with? Where did you do drugs and stuff? And okay, cool. Now that we know, just stay away from that, and you'll be fine.
Let me ask you a question just real quick, because it kind of strikes me, and I think, and I think it's true for a lot of people that have, developed some unhealthy behaviors that they've stacked on top of each other, whether it's shopping and getting into debt, or eating and gaining weight, or not working, and feeling low self-esteem because your bills are piling up, or alcoholism or addiction.
Yeah.
As the stack against us gets bigger and bigger, and the journey out seems longer and longer, you almost resign yourself to the fact that there is no way. I mean, the first step seems so hard, and even if it just takes away the first case, the first pound, the first bill, that I can't sustain getting out so long of a road that I might as well not even start. And that's although you were forced to rehab, did you have that sense with all these cases? And
it's exactly how it felt.
Yeah,
I was like, I felt like I knew my relationship with drugs and alcohol, my perspective on life, the things I was doing was unorthodox. I very much saw it was different. I wasn't confused about that. And I saw other people living, a very clean, sober, normal lifestyle. They go to school, they get good grades, go off to college, like get a job, like the normal thing people do. But I could never see myself being that person. I felt like I don't want to call it doomed because I wasn't that upset about it, but I just was like, this is my life's path. This is what God had in store for me. Was just to run around and sell drugs and do my thing. I fully believed it.
So what happened? I mean, where did the courage to start taking those small, simple steps in the right direction come from? How hard was it to keep walking when there was a lot wrong? I mean, as a lot of people, and at your age, you were how old when you went to rehab?
I was like 16.
Yeah, I mean, at your young age, you'd stacked up a bag of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it was stuff that honestly, like, I didn't know I could ever get away from. I like still have stuff on my record because of it, but. I go to rehab. I actually get kicked out for selling drugs in there. I couldn't stop.
Right.
I get out. I have my court hearings. A few of the things that, like, a lot of the drugs I was selling was weed, and by the time I had gotten out, they'd passed a few laws to where some of the things I did got dropped down from felonies to misdemeanors. So I got lucky. I didn't end up going to juvenile hall, and but I still couldn't stop. I was living in a new place with my aunt, and I remember it was, the middle of the week. School for everybody else was in session, but since I was just kind of like bouncing around from like, living in a crack house to like being in rehab, and like I wasn't going to school. So I'm riding around on a bike that I borrowed from somebody in North Hollywood, and I have like a vendetta to get drugs. I'm riding around in the like beating hot sun. It's right before summer, and I'm looking for a homeless person, somebody who looks sketchy, somebody who buy me alcohol. And I rode around on that bike for like 7 hours, and I could not find a single person. No, no home, like I'm not in a nice area. Like I was not in a good area where like you'd normally see homeless people, you normally see like somebody sketchy, like I just nothing. And I get a call, I stop, I get off the bike, take the call. I think it was like my mom or my grandma or something asking where I was. And before I get back on this bike, I like had this moment of clarity where I was like, what am I doing? Like it
Wow.
was the first time I had asked myself, like why do you keep doing this? I was like, you have all these cases against you. Like this is the first time I really ever thought about it. I have all these cases against me. Like I do one more thing, or I at that point I still like I was like still in process of possibly going to juvenile hall. Um, I do one more thing. I'm definitely going. The girl I was with, doesn't want to be with me because I can't stop doing drugs. Um, my family and I like have no relationship anymore. I have like no foreseeable future doing anything important. Like, why do I keep doing this? And I could not answer the question. I had no reasonable explanation for anything I had done for years. Um, so I went home.
What was I mean, first of all, I'm just captivated by that, by the power of that story. And I encourage a lot of times, even for myself, the power of asking myself hard questions. It's something I'll say that I never really was very self-reflective, as I was dealing with life's troubles. And I think, it was either one, I didn't think I'd like the answers,
Yeah.
and so taking time to ask myself hard questions like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Is there something different that you could be doing? Is there somebody that you could ask that's doing this differently to help you? I don't think I wanted the answers to those questions. I didn't think
No.
and I also didn't know what questions to ask. But from a mental performance standpoint, just from a thought replacement standpoint, just that moment of asking ourselves an empowering question and giving ourselves an opportunity to try and find an answer can change your life.
Yeah. I mean, I never asked myself that question before. I Every time I had ever really sought out drugs or alcohol when in desperation like that, I'd find it. Um, I definitely believe there's something or someone out there looking out for me, um, because I was riding around for a long enough time for me to like really stop and think. You know, I
Yeah.
was sober at that moment, um, had been for at least a week or two, and I'm like, I have no like I have no reason to get loaded again. I'm not withdrawing. I don't need to like soften my kick. It's just like I'm like drawn to it. It's just to become the habit for me. Um, I ended up going home and sitting and really thinking. My mom, like I said, was in and out of the program my whole life and even before so. And she's like, I'm gonna throw you in rehab again. And I really didn't want to go because it sucked. And she told me I should go to some meetings. And I was like, maybe if I go to some meetings, like she won't make me go to rehab. So that's why I went. Um, Heard some people tell my story. I connected. I was like, I remember I saw this 15-year-old girl. Her name was Shreya, and she was really cute. But so I paid attention to her. And
Yeah.
she's 15. She had like the same story as me. She's a year younger and has a year of sobriety. So she got sober at 14, has a year of sobriety. She was like, selling heroin, doing all this stuff since she was like 10. And I'm like, and all I knew was like, if this girl can do it and like have a different life and like do something, maybe just maybe I could too. I remember I sat at that meeting hall all day, the rest of the day, and I wrote out a list of goals. I still have it, and I wrote out, I think it was like 42 or 43 things that I wanted. It was very simple stuff. It was like have a year of sobriety, open a bank account, have $1,000 saved, learn how to play the guitar. Like it was just like the most minimal things you could ever want for like your life at being at rock bottom. Um, I forgot about that list, and I found it about a year ago. And
What's the score?
every single one of them,
Yeah.
every single one of them, and I didn't even think about it, and it's not like to pat myself on the back or anything. It was just like I did the right thing.
No, quite the contrary.
You
I mean,
know?
I think one of the fundamental foundational principles of my personal development program that I created with My Life, My Pen is to know where you're going. And I think our minds and our behaviors, they want direction. It's like, when you put, if we're going to go somewhere and we've got to put a directions into our phone, and we take that big Google map and say, if I want to go from Thousand Oaks and I want to go to, Oceanside, San Diego, we need coordinates. We need to put it in, and it gives us a big map, and then we hit enter, and it shrinks it down and says make a left. Like you said, it just little behaviors. But if we don't tell ourselves where we want to go, we could end up anywhere. And I think there's been some research recently done. I was just reading about it this morning on the power of writing down goals, and just the simple act of writing things down, giving us a sense of direction. I think more than 50% of the time, it increases the probability of reaching those goals. So it's incredible that you asked yourself an empowering question, you took some action, and then you wrote down some goals. So for people listening that feel stuck, they're like, I don't know what to do. It's like, will you do these things? Will you ask yourself an empowering question today?
Yeah.
Will you take an empowering action, and will you write down? And by the way, you don't have to write down 42. You can just write down fucking 5.
Yeah.
You can write down 5 goals that you have, to get from where you are to where you want to be. And just those things alone were enough to build some momentum for you, huh?
Yeah. It's what's interesting to me now is like, I've done a lot of work on like personal growth. I think we're very in line with kind of the way that we like structure our brains and do things. I've been very interested in like neuro-linguistic programming and like how all that stuff works for a while now. And kind of looking back on that situation, it was like, if with just a little effort of like just asking myself like one simple question and like writing down stuff and like just kind of trying to live life better along the lines of the things that I wanted, and how well it worked out. If I actually do that stuff now in my life with intention and purpose and focus, how much better it could be.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what has led me to where I am. I stayed sober, and
so you got sober before your 21st birthday.
Yeah, I got sober.
It can be done.
When I was 16. I finished school barely. I graduated from an actual high school. I had been to continuation schools I've been to 6 different high schools, and I graduated from a real one. And it was, I had a bunch of guys I was, taking through the program, and I ended up meeting this lady. Her name's Kathy, and she's speaking at this big convention. And I have all my guys like following me around. And at this time I have really long hair, like down to my shoulders. And so after the meeting, I go thank the lady who was speaking. And it turns out she's from Santa Clarita. A buddy of mine had asked me to go speak at their like home group in that town the next week. So I was like, hey, I'm going to be your home group. I just saw you speak. If you're around, you should come, say hi again. And so she she actually comes. And I was like, well, that's crazy. So she picks me up after the meeting, and she's like, you looked like Jesus leading his followers at that convention. You had 5 guys following you around. You have long hair, and they just listened to every word you said. At that point, I had about 2 years clean. And she was like, listen, like if you can impact people's lives like this, why don't you come work for me? And so she offers me a job. This is really funny. She's like, you see these shoes, they're real Louis Vuitton. She's like, you see these earrings, they're real diamonds. She's like, you see this? She's like, I'm sober, but like I have an amazing life because of it, and she's like, come work for me. Call me tomorrow. And so I'm doing data entry for a friend of mine's mom. I'm like in the middle of the job, and I'm like, oh, I got to call her. She says, can you be at my office in an hour and see me? And I'm like, okay. leave in the middle of the work of the work I was doing. I was like, it felt like something was calling me. Um, and she hands me the phone on her desk, and she's like, "Sell me ink cartridges for printers." Um, and apparently I was good at it. She hired me, and like that started my sales career. I was sitting in a boiler room for like 8 hours a day, just cold calling like 100 and 150 numbers a day, like trying to get people to buy, a few $100s worth of ink and toner. Um, and it was funny because I saw people around me like hating it. They just didn't like it. They weren't good at it. And I fell in love. I was like, this is where I want to be.
Yeah.
It was like the first time since getting sober, like other than helping other people get sober, that I had like found a purpose in my life.
And what was, I mean, because like you said, people can view that position in a lot of different ways. What was it that for you that felt so purposeful? Because I think people think, the reason I ask you this, Nick, is because I think people think they need to have this, solve some world problem, create the next electric car. It's like this, my purpose is to solve world hunger or world peace.
And it can be, it just doesn't need to be.
Yeah, I mean, you can start with small purpose.
Well, I'm very much in the belief that like, the analogy of like, I got to put my mask on in the airplane first before I help anybody else, like, and that's obviously like, I've always aspired to like, give back to the community and like help people and, start schools in Africa or like whatever it is. Right.
But you can find that same thing by a purpose and just being of service to this woman and her business and selling ink cartridges.
And I want to do more than that, but that's where I started. And, I ended up making a decent amount of money there. And, I realized like what I was capable of.
Which is?
I don't know. Like I never saw my potential. I was kind of beat down on myself. I had really negative self-talk.
Played small.
My whole life.
Played small.
And for the first time, it was like I had something I was good at that I could see myself doing in the long run that would like work. I ended up leaving, and I worked for another marketing company, and like kind of found out what I really like is like sales, marketing, growing businesses. And when COVID happened, I ended up getting fired from that marketing company because of COVID, and I sat was living with my grandparents, and my grandma had like a little art studio, and I begged her, and I was like, please, can I like take this over for like the next couple months? So I get fired. I like found like a little foldable table, set up a desk, borrowed a friend's computer, and I just dialed random businesses off of my cell phone for like 8 hours a day. And I had bills. I decided to buy like a nice Mercedes when I was working at the toner place because I was making good money. And after getting fired from the place, I like had no money. I like put myself like $15,000 in debt on credit cards just to like float my start of my business. And I didn't really intend it to be a business. I had a few companies that were like, you can work for sales commission only. And it was like, I just kind of started learning. It was like, I'd sell for like 8 hours a day. I'd DoorDash at night for like 4 hours. And then I'd come back and I'd stay up till like 2 or 3 in the morning, like watching YouTube videos on like how to build websites and like how to run advertising campaigns. And like, I just spent all my time like focused on work.
It's the perfect culmination of the strategy, which I teach, which is A plus S plus GOYA. So it's ability plus a strategy plus get off your anatomy.
Yeah.
It's equal results. And
Yeah.
I want to just reflect a little bit on confidence and about, the concept of where confidence can come from, because for somebody who didn't like themselves, for somebody who had a lot of comparison to other people who felt less than, to have this shift occur to where your self-talk changes. By the way, self-talk is the number one contributor to self-confidence.
100%.
I just stop listening to yourself, start talking to yourself, and make sure it's what you want, what you need to hear to have the life you want. And so I'm so glad that you brought that up. But confidence, it comes from doing. That confidence you had to take that job at the toner company, and then seeing success and really, kind of giving that success a narrative, which is like, I'm good at something. I like this. I'm good at it. I'm going to put some time into it. I'm going to have results in it. Led you to developing self-confidence in yourself, that whether it was, the marketing job that didn't work out because of COVID, or the confidence to start your own thing. That confidence
Yeah.
comes from doing. It's not necessarily this feeling that you have to have before you do. It actually comes from the doing.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. When I was at the toner place, they were very, very big on personal growth. And my boss Kathy, she like assigned us CDs. She would give us CDs, and she said, "Listen, like on your way to work every morning, I want you to listen to this CD."
Who'd she give you?
Tony Robbins.
Oh, good.
And so every
Sure.
morning I was listening to Tony Robbins for like a year straight. I was just Tony Robbins in my ear every day, all day. And I started like writing up my goals and like I'd like break up like, short term, like medium, long term. And I'd like have all these, like I had like this whole structure where on the first of every month, I'd like do my goals every day. I'm like writing out stuff. And I would have 5 to 10 affirmations that I would say to myself every single day, like without fail. And on the way to work, I'd listen to my Tony Robbins, and, a minute or two before I pulled in, I turned on really loud music and I would scream those affirmations at the top of my lungs every day. I even like brought people to work with me sometimes and did it in front of them, and they looked at me like I was a complete loon. But it worked. And it was like everything I did, like it was just like I was focusing my energy on whatever I was yelling in the car or writing on those pieces of papers. And by doing that, it's transitioned to be a little less intense today.
Sure, but the thermostat,
you know-
the thermostat of your identity is really driven by those things. You've built a narrative and identity, and
that's what it was.
We become what we conceive ourselves to be, and you've turned the thermostat up, and so now maybe you can reflect a little bit, because I think there's we have these and if you've listened to this podcast, you'll know I'll talk a lot about the dials that drive results, which is our beliefs and our behaviors, and ultimately getting those two things to be in alignment, where our beliefs and our behaviors are in alignment, they overlap. Sustained results, are really driven from those things. And I think you've got to that point. And before that, when beliefs are over here and behaviors are over here, selling drugs, trying to build my ego up, I call that the integrity gap. That's where all that unhealthy coping stuff can live, is where our beliefs and our behaviors are out of alignment. And
I had no direction. So there's so much room for anything just to creep in,
So Monday Media Marketing, a sober life. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to be you now, and the things that you found to be the most rewarding about what you're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot going on now. I mean, it's like I feel like I have a very large life. I get to do a lot of stuff, which is cool. Some of it material, some of it giving back. And, at the end of the day, it's like, it doesn't matter like whether I run a business or not, or, have money in the bank account or not, or, am completely sober or not. Like for me, I am completely sober and I need that for me. But, for me, what it's about is like, am I happy on a day-to-day basis? Do I love myself, and can I communicate with others in like a healthy way? And for me, that's a yes. That's my like my temperature gauge, is like, do I feel okay? Am I, in the overall workings of my life, happy? Maybe not every second of every day, but am I mostly happy? And do I have good relationships? Do I treat people well? Do I believe I am a good person? Yeah. And like, that's kind of like my ultimate goal today, is just to be those things.
Yeah. I think maybe you can shed some light on it, but in reflection, I would say that it's the doing those things that make you happy.
Yeah.
And people say, I want to be happy. It's like, well, what are you doing to be happy?
Yeah.
Because happiness is like confidence. It's a feeling you get from doing things that make you happy.
Exactly.
And so you can't
Esteemable acts create self-esteem.
Yeah. You can't just say, I just want to be happy. He looks happy. It's like, well, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You have gifts. Are you using them? You have relationships. Are you deep into them? Are you of service to people? Are you altruistic? Are you, in flow? Are you using the gifts that God gave you? Are you exercising? Healthy behaviors create healthy results, and so happiness is an action. The last thing I'll ask you, actually, I have 2 questions before we wrap up. One is, what would this Nick tell young Nick? What's the big lesson that you've learned that you'd like him to know?
It's interesting, right? Like as much as like what I've done and the life I lived was like miserable for a lot of it and uncomfortable and bad, right? I wouldn't change a thing about it. If I had the opportunity to go back and tell myself something, I think I would just be like, everything's going to be all right. But I wouldn't want to do anything that would change it.
Yeah.
Like a lot of it was crappy. I went through a lot of stuff and I saw a lot of bad things that like a kid shouldn't see. But it all meant something.
Yeah.
It all meant something. I've had, I saw a lot of violent stuff when I was selling drugs and living in different houses. And, I've had a few guys who were trying to get sober and needed help and saw a lot of violent stuff, had seen people be killed or, seen a lot of just crazy stuff. And I've been able to like help them through it and talk to them and relate to them. And it's like, it was all worth it.
What is the one piece of advice you give people that are feeling stuck, that are in that spot of wanting to overcome some adversity in their lives? They're feeling stuck. They're feeling that mountain, that we talked about, that mountain of that bag of trouble that just seems too heavy to even start unloading. What's the kind of calling card that you would give to them to kind of start that journey?
I've thought about this question a lot. What could help somebody? And I think the biggest challenge in like trying to get out of whatever you're getting in or whatever you're in is just being indecisive about what you want. And, when you're in that place of being at rock bottom, it's like, what do I want? And it's a lot of effort to figure out what that is for you. And so it feels like to attain success, because you don't really know what you want, you have to do so much. And I guess my advice would be is like, pick 5 things, write down 5 goals and then only worry about that. That's it. Make it really, really simple. If you're like smoking and overeating and drinking and have no money and all this stuff, like just worry about one of them. It's like we don't have to fix it all at once.
Make it simple to start.
Make it really, really simple.
Yeah.
And that was my biggest challenge, was realizing I didn't have to do it all. I didn't have to be an amazing person the day after asking myself what I was doing. All I knew is I wanted to be different. So I just did it like a little bit at a time.
Yeah. Wow. It's so powerful. I think that's right. If you want more, you have to do more. If you want to be more, you have to do more. And, give us a little insight into Monday media marketing and how people can find you, where they can follow you. And Heather will, of course, post it in the show notes to make sure that people are interested in connecting with you. And, I just, before we wrap up and you give us, some of the details on your 411 here, just thank you. So courageous, such a great young man, such a good example for so many of us, and especially for young people that feel that pressure that a lot of young people do. That, I don't think some of the things you were feeling about, connectivity or feeling less than or different than, I think that's, affecting a lot of people today, not just young people. And so thank you for being a very bright light, for being a friend, and for coming on, man.
Yeah, it's been good. Insight on the company. Super simple website, mondaymediamarketing.com. You can follow my Instagram. It's Wolf of Westlake. And
I love that.
In my bio, I have a link to a couple things I'm doing. We do websites, advertisements, marketing consulting. We're developing a software to help businesses kind of manage their stuff, CRM system, and lots of cool stuff going on. So
that's great. Get connected with Nick. Like I said, a very bright light, and thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Wow, dude,
that was great.
That was awesome. I really had no idea about your all of your history. Incredible. I mean, you're a what an overcome story, huh? My God. And I love where I always love where all these episodes go, but I think, the most powerful thing, besides having dealt with this at such a young age, is just that how much was on you, how much, how big that bag of trouble was at such a young age. And I love that. Just make the start simple. Just focus on one thing. And because it is the start that stops most people.
Yeah. Well, it's like figuring out like, oh, what do I want to be when I grow up? It's like you could be anything, but just like, pick something and try it.
That's it. Yeah.
Like you don't
have to have all the answers
you don't know
to start the journey. Yeah.
That's I've had a lot of people come to me and be like, what do you think I should do in my life? Like, I want to be an astronaut or maybe an entrepreneur or maybe I should just go to school or this or that. And I'm just like, I don't know, man. Just like flip a coin, pick one and do it. And if you don't like it, move on,
Yeah.
Like
go to astronaut school and then, So good, dude. Yeah. Great episode.